I'll call this meeting of the Marshfield Common Council for Tuesday, September 14th to order. I see that everyone has logged in and is present. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item C is public comment period. This time the council president will recognize members of the public who have indicated a desire to address the council. On recognition by the council president, persons may address the council, first stating their name and address. The council may act on emergency matters introduced by members of the public. Are there any members of the public who wish to speak? Anyone wishing to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on to item D, approval of the minutes of the August 24th, 2021 meeting. Mr. Wagner, your motion. Okay. And Mr. Fisher, you second. We have a motion to approve the minutes of August 24th. Please vote. And that motion carries unanimously. Item E, staff updates. We have an introduction of Mike Ress as Parks Technician by Justin Casperson, Parks and Recreation Director.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone. As carrying on with our tradition we started last time, I'm pleased to announce that Mike Ress has been started with us last Tuesday, September 7th, as a park technician. Mike was formerly with the Marshfield Clinic, working in their maintenance department for many years, as well as associated sales and leasing. So if you do see him out and about in our parks, our buildings, this is Mike.
Welcome aboard, Mike. And the second item under staff updates is the annual Board of Public Works bus tour. Dan Connect, Public Works Director.
Thank you. I just want to give a quick reminder that tomorrow night, leaving here at 5 o'clock, is our bus tour of Public Works projects. And all of you on the Finance Committee are also welcome to attend. We have room on the bus. So if you're interested, just shoot me an email tomorrow. Let me know you're coming, and we won't leave without you. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. It's always fun and informative. Item F is Council President's comments, and I have none this evening. Item G is Council comments. Mr. Butke.
The word has to be out that we have a birthday girl in our presence here today. Mrs. Hall's birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Dan.
And if you want to have a speech, Deb, that's okay.
Mr. Fire.
Council President, on behalf of the Veterans Council of the City of Marshfield, we want to thank the Fire Department and Police Department for attending the 9/11 celebration we had at the park. It was well attended. I was surprised that we had as many people there, and it was a nice event to remember the 20th anniversary of the worst probably thing that's ever happened to the nation in our lifetime. So again, the citizens of Marshfield and everybody that came, thank you.
Yes, I'll second that. It was a nice event, and thank you to the Veterans Council for asking me to speak. Item H, reports from commissions, boards, and committees. Any reports? Seeing none. Item I is the consent agenda, which you have before you. Mr. Fire, your motion. Okay, we have a motion to approve, a second by Mr. Butke. Please vote. And that motion carries unanimously. There are no items removed from the consent agenda, so we'll move on to item K, presentation of candidates for election to a 5-year term on the Marshfield Utilities Commission. I'm presenting that. We had 3 candidates, but one of the candidates informed us this morning that he was withdrawing his letter of interest, Mr. Moen. So we have Mike Ebrel and Jeff Scheel, and I'll invite both of them to say say a few words if they're interested. Mike, are you? Yes, please.
Just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to serve the last 10 years and hope that you'll reappoint me for the next 5. And if you had any questions.
Thanks, Mike. Mr. Shield, I'll let you have an opportunity as well.
Well, somebody told me to ask or be expected to answer a question as to why I'm doing this. I'll be real honest with you. I've kept some of the Hub City News articles that kind of spurred me onto this, that were some very contentious meetings that you guys went through with the police department, or not the police department, with the Fire and Police Commission and the mayor and such. And I just found myself kind of being dismayed at how things devolved to that. And it gets to be the point where, well, do you just complain about it, or do you decide you want to see if you can do something about it? And so I looked at this as, I'm probably not an expert on utilities, if that's what you're looking for, but I am a pretty competent, got a pretty competent head on my shoulders, I believe, for numbers and such. And I kind of look at this as time, energy, and resources. And my feeling is that we should be doing better, or be trying to do better with those items. I mean, I don't even want to know what all it cost us from a city standpoint for all of the problems that we went through. But I won't be one to come in here and make an accusation without some kind of proof or some semblance of decorum. I mean, I thought about coming in to talk many, many times here when I read bits and pieces in the Hub City News. And then when I see the next meeting and see how that one turned out, I just shudder as to how, I don't even know how I would respond, or how you guys kind of put up with some of that if what I read was honest. And so for that reason, I guess I'm throwing my hat in the ring. I'm more of a, I don't know what you want to call it, needs versus wants, or, I've got, not just for the Utilities Commission, there's lots of things that I see that you guys go through that I have questions about, and it's really hard as a general citizen to pick it out. And I don't know how to fix that. The Hub City News gives you bits and pieces, but it's kind of like it seems like it's the regular news. It's the big flashy things that get presented and get people riled up. And I like to dig deeper into things and see, what actually happened, or, to be honest with you, with the Police and Fire Commission, until I actually dug into an article that came up in one of the local news broadcasts, but it was just a blurb for about 30 seconds on the podcast. But then they said, see our full article on the internet. And I did. And that was for the first time that I actually kind of got a feeling if that was right. And I'm hoping that the print media has got some responsibility to present the truth. And so, I felt better about that. But like I said, I'm new to this. I'll be asking a lot of questions if you do point me. And it probably, you might think I'm a pest, but I'm not a yes man. I kind of like to know what's going on and why we're doing what we're doing. And so I guess I'm asking your consideration in that. If you've got any questions, I said my background is I've got a bacteriology degree and I've got a physical therapy degree from UW-Madison. I worked at the hospital for 30-some years as a physical therapist. Probably why you see me carrying around a mask, because I'm kind of a believer, and my wife works there now and says the units are filling up with COVID. And so, I'm kind of a facts-based person. If I told you some of the things that I heard in the grocery store in the last 18 months when I'm, especially because I'm a senior citizen, I go out on Tuesdays, and boy, some of the preaching that goes on about, what we're doing, and we're eliminating the police, and we're, and all sorts of things. And I said, well, and I'd like to step in, but some of these folks really have got, I think, a misconception. I don't think we were trying to shut down the police department by what you guys were doing. We were, I think what you were doing was trying to, provide the folks with, a force that can respond the way it needs to. Lots of questions, some things I think you guys do wonderful, other things I think what's going on, and I guess I'm gonna ask for the opportunity to find out how it works and go from there. So I thank you for your time.
Anyone have any questions for Mr. Shield? Thank you to both candidates, and there's no action to take at this time. Final action will be on September 28th. Item L is a presentation, staff's proposed 2022 to 2024 strategic plan presented by Steve Barb, City Administrator.
Thank you. I'll just take a second here to get where I want to be or where I need to be here. With help, obviously. This one, yeah, timed out this one. So it's on, but it's not on there yet. I need to, oh, there it is. Thank you. Thanks for your help as always, Ning. I can turn it on when I get to my office in the morning. After that, it's kind of a challenge. I want to start off by just kind of setting the table for how we got here. Back in the fall of 2018, the city began working, staff actually, with some help, on putting together some items to bring forward to the council as a strategic plan. And was discussed a couple times, I believe, and then in December of 2018, the council did approve a 3-year strategic plan for the city, running from 2019 through 2021. It was a fairly aggressive plan, if you remember. I think I put it back in the council packet tonight. We accomplished a number of things, and then, of course, we ran into some issues. COVID came along in March of 2020. I think as referenced by the last speaker, there was some other issue we've had to deal with internally that soaked up a lot of time and energy. And there have been some budget challenges along the way, too. I think we've talked about that at some length coming forward from the TIF transfers of a couple of years ago and just trying to get ourselves to a better place in terms of our city finances to be able to afford some of the things we wanted to accomplish. So we completed some things, we started some things, some other things maybe didn't get going. And we want to take that and move forward for another 3-year plan, 2022 through 2024. Staff has been working on this at staff level for the past few months. And I think that our goal in bringing this to you, and again, this is your plan ultimately, you can change it, you can add to it, you can subtract from it. Staff's goal in bringing this to you is to kind of narrow down the field a little bit in terms of, I think, like I said, it was an aggressive plan last time, had a lot of items, maybe was trying to bite off more than we could chew. And I think our desire this time is to make the main thing the main thing. If you think about sometimes when you make a list for yourself on the weekend, if you have 25 items, you may lose heart early on. If you have a handful of things that need to get done on the weekend, you're more likely to succeed and nail them because you've made, again, the main thing as far as your time and energy. So what you have before you is a proposed 2022 to 2024 strategic plan, only for presentation tonight, just bringing it to you for your review and comment. And as I said, ultimately, this is your plan. I'd like some feedback tonight. We can schedule more feedback for 2 weeks from now. If you feel it's a good plan, we can certainly bring it back for approval with any minor modifications you have. That's entirely up to you. So if you remember, we had 5 key strategic areas 3 years ago, and there's 7 now. They're multiplying. We kind of carved out, when we looked at some of our goals, we sort of felt it created a couple new categories. So one of the 2 ones is that's new is administration. We didn't have that before. Communications is a repeat, along with the economic development, financial management, human resources, infrastructure, and there's a new category, quality of life, that we've added this time as well. These are the 7 categories under which I think roughly 18 goals fit. Under administration, there's 3. Make significant progress towards citywide property revaluation. I think some of you know this, that we have fallen to a point where we are out of compliance with the assessment ratio. That's the ratio of assessed value compared to equalized value. You probably noticed that that's been getting worse the last couple of years with the rising property values. Our equalized value has actually done pretty well in the last couple of years, but assessed value is lagging. So we need to get on that. Encourage greater use of technology by our citizens to access city services. We've seen some of that because of COVID. We've actually seen some improvement in terms of being able to plug our citizens in to do work and get business completed remotely. Remember, we closed City Hall for a period of weeks here, and we thought, oh, this is going to be terrible. And it was uncomfortable, but people during the last year and a half have learned that they can do some of their business from their own home. And we want to continue to make that more possible for them. And then provide more orientation and training to the council, committees, boards, and commissions. This has been flagged before. I think we made inroads from time to time, but nothing substantial, nothing comprehensive. You know, when you come on a committee, you come on a board, come on council, do you know what to expect? Have you been given the basics? You know, we have people tonight looking to be on the Utilities Commission. We have the Police Fire Commission has an opening here soon. When we get somebody on board, do we give them that good basis from which to work? In other words, do they know the foundation of what they're supposed to do? Communications, we have 2 basic goals. One is to increase the level of resident engagement and citizen participation. You see under the measurables, we're looking at trying to analyze, research, and establish new platforms. We want to do more promoting of what we do here, inform, engage, and educate, as we say. I think we talked about this recently in terms of whether or not we're meeting the grade right now. Are we falling short of what you would like to see to our public outreach? And I think this is a critical goal that you'll see in the next 3 years. And then along with that, I guess I kind of walked myself into it, increase outreach to the public and our stakeholders. We want to make more easy to use platforms. We want to get data to where we can determine if we're hitting the mark. Are we reaching the demographics that we're trying to hit? Or are we falling short of informing our citizens? 3 goals under economic development: support the creation of new housing opportunities based upon identified needs. I think Josh has done a good job over the past few months, and more than that actually, in terms of highlighting the needs for single-family housing, for other housing alternatives. We know that we've been deficient in single and 2-family lots to build on, making some progress with the city subdivision and now with TIF District 13 that Dave Ferris will be talking about here in a couple of minutes. But we want to make sure that we're pressing on with that so that there's places for people to live. If they want to live here, work here, they want to be part of our community. Develop a new industrial park using TIF District 12 funding. We've already approved TIF District 12, but we want to be working on trying to get the incentives out there, do promotional packages, and really be trying to implement strategies to bring new businesses online and into the city's industrial park area. And then finally, implement economic development strategic plan. We want to be reviewing and amending this plan annually. We all talk about this. If you do a plan and put it on the shelf and you look at it 2-3 years later, not only is it not getting done, but it's also falling behind in terms of its applicability. So we want to be annually updating that plan and working on those objectives that are identified. Financial management, there's really 2. One is to continue to reduce the structural budget deficit and improve our bond rating. We have made good progress in the last couple of years on the structural budget deficit. Give council a lot of credit for the decisions that have been made in terms of the tax rate and just supporting some of the initiatives that Ron and I brought forward. We did some cuts in spending last year to bring the general fund expenses below the previous year, which is almost unheard of to have an actual dollar amount lower than the year before it. So we're making progress, but there's more work to do. One of the goals there is to get that negative outlook hopefully reduced or removed from our current bond rating, and then someday hopefully to improve our bond rating a step when we're able to. And then maximize use of the available American Rescue Plan Act funds. These are the federal funds. I think you've probably heard that we've been allocated $1.9 million. That's great. Now what can we spend it on without having to pay it back? So there's still a lot of information coming out. I know Ron has been keeping up on this. We've set up a team to monitor, to prioritize. The staff team has been working on trying to get projects lined up in priority order. So when we find out what all is going to be acceptable, we're ready to move forward and expend some of those $1.9 million on important projects for the city. Human resources, 3 goals. 1, to fully implement the 2018 adopted compensation plan with McGrath. I think we made good progress in the last couple of years And we want to continue doing that so that we don't wake up in 2024, for example, saying, oh my gosh, we've fallen behind, we're out of compliance. Let's hire another consultant to do a pay study. Now, sometimes there's going to be financial challenges in keeping up with it. We understand that, but to the best of our ability, we want to stay current on that plan. Align the common personnel policies across city departments. Jen has done a super job the last couple of years in terms of trying to align our various benefits, including dental and others. We want to extend that and be now extending the policies and making sure that we have policies that are in sync with one another as well. So that would be a good thing for us. And then finally, to enhance performance management program. We do some degree of this now, but really to work harder on implementing more performance profiles, new hire follow-up, coaching, the kind of things that give an employee, a new employee especially, the best possible opportunity for success. We're all excited when we hire somebody new, and do we really walk them through the process? Do we give them the skills and the tools and the leadership necessary to be successful here? 3 infrastructure items. One, of course, is to reconstruct East 17th Street from Maple to Peach. That's scheduled for next year. I know that that'll be talked about in Board of Public Review again soon with Dan and Tom as they continue to work on that plan for that major street reconstruction. Adopt the development plan for the police and city garage projects. Board of Public Works has talked about this a lot. Obviously, funding is a concern, but we seem to have some opportunity, especially in the city garage area, possibly with the county as a team project. And we want to work on that. We want to continue to plan for the police needs as well. And then finally, coordinate our annual street and sanitary sewer improvements with Marshfield Utilities. You know, sometimes you wonder, does the right hand know what the left hand is doing? I think our staffs work great together, but to the greatest degree possible, we want to really plan out so that we do the projects at the same time to be able to make those improvements at the same time as the utilities folks are doing them. And then quality of life. We want to continue development and connectivity of our bicycle pedestrian trail system. I think we've come a long ways on that. I think one of the things people really appreciate about Marshfield is the ability to use our trails. There's some great trails here. And if people are listening at home, I'd encourage them to check them out. Bryce Hembrick did a good job lately with a plan he's been working on. We want people to get out there and be healthy and to use our amenities. Implement Emerald Ash Borer Response Plan and develop a Brain Park EAB plan. Mark did a super job, our forester, a couple weeks ago in terms of laying out the possible alternatives for Brain Park and the options that we're facing. And it was a non-action item presentation, but we want to be working on that. We want to be working on controlling EAB and responding as best we can. And I think we've been on that for a few years, but it's a continued priority. And then finally, improve the cemetery signage and public communications on rules and policies. Last year we had an unfortunate situation where we took action to try and clean up the cemetery. There were kudos for that from some people, but certainly there were a lot of people who didn't know about it. There was some heartburn about the way it was done. I think we've learned a little bit about that now. We've done a better job, or are doing a better job in promoting it this fall, and will for the future, to make sure that we keep the cemetery looking good, but we don't alienate or irritate people as they come to visit their loved ones, and that we do our best to make sure they understand what's going on, what we're trying to accomplish, and what the expectations are for the things that they might put out by the grave sites over time. So I think we've made some good strides, and we want to continue to work in that area to inform people about what we're doing. So the status of the plan is presented to you tonight for review and discussion. Definitely looking for your input and feedback, including any suggested additions and changes. You folks are the one who hear from constituents every day in your neighborhood, at restaurants, at churches, wherever you are. You hear people say, why don't you do this? How come you can't do more than that? You probably hear that more than staff does, I'm guessing. So do you have any suggested ideas to add or modify this list? And then if you're only looking to make minor changes, we can bring this back 2 weeks from now for approval as a new 3-year plan starting January 1st. If you have more to talk about, more discussion, want to delve into it, great. That's wonderful. We'll bring it back as a discussion item in 2 weeks and get more into the particulars of what you'd like to see in your 3-year plan. So that's really what I have for you tonight. Like I said, it's discussion only tonight, no action, but I would take any comments, questions, or suggestions from the council right now.
Mr. Butke, you have a comment.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what you have in here, Steve. One thing, being on the council for a long time, Mike can attest to this, and you alluded to it, Steve, that we had all kinds, at the old city hall, we had stacks under our desk. And like you said, we would look at it once in a while, and you find out you didn't do a lot of that
So I think we're getting better at that. We're not, definitely not there yet. But I also want to inform the council that talking about wages and McGrath's study and all that, come budget time this year, I am going to ask that we make all the catch-up things that we should do because we held back on it over the last couple of years. I'm going to want to get that up to snuff and bite the bullet and get that part done. And I'm not browning up to any staff member. I think you all know better than that. I'm just trying to do what's right and get it done because the more you put stuff off, it's harder to do. Need to get caught up there and then adjust the budget accordingly wherever we can. And that's going to be a top thing on my list. Thank you, Steve, for your
Well, thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. And adding to your first comment about, putting something on the shelf or putting it under the desk, I think we did a good job the first couple of years of updating the council at mid-year and at the end of the year in terms of the progress we were making. Like I said, and this is not an excuse, but COVID and some of the things we were dealing with here at City Hall the past 12 months or so did derail some of that, which is understandable. But the document is always something we can go back to see where are we at on the bigger priorities. Are we pursuing the more important issues in the midst of the next agenda or the next complaint that we're addressing? And we don't ever want it to be under the desk.
Mr. Wagner, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In all the years that I've been on the council also, I have never really had a citizen call me up and just want to talk about our strategic plan, like ever. What they want to talk about is how come I've got a pothole the size of a Volkswagen out in front of my house? And sometimes they do. They talk about drainage problems. They talk about a lot of different things. But what bothers me about this is every strategic plan I've ever worked with in anything and been either a council member or a staff member or an administrator or a mayor, no matter anywhere, the public was also invited to come in and say, here's what we think we want you to do. Here are the problems we do. This is prepared completely by staff, and what this looks like to me is a laundry list of what the staff picked and chose that they want to work on for the next 3 years. And we have no way of knowing whether or not this is what the public wants more than anything else. You talk about, one of your goals here is communications, and you're talking about, let's see, how did you put it? Analyze, research, and establish, utilize new platforms to promote, communicate city messaging to residents and analyze, research platforms, establish platforms of full utilization. It's a two-way street. That is all one way. That is us talking to them. How do we make it easier for them to get to us and tell us what the needs are? And, some people don't, I haven't seen, for years, I haven't seen the calls for town hall type of situations where the public can just, they can come in, fill up the room, talk into the microphone and tell us what they want and how they want it, and nobody gets an argument with them. I don't like what's going on here. I think this is okay for a work program, but again, I think it's cherry picked, and I think it's what the staff wants to do and not what the council wants to do. I don't know if anybody else is going to look at it that way or not, but I think I expressed my displeasure with this in an email to you, and I just want to make sure that the public knows that I am displeased with this. Thank you.
Yeah, and I appreciate the town hall idea. I know we did that a few times a few years ago. I think it's been quite a few years now. And anything we can do to get feedback from the public, I think Tom Laux is committed to doing that in various ways. We need to do that. That really came out of the conversation back in August too. It's not a one-way street, it's a two-way conversation. I think for this, staff, really looked at some things that we're facing. I think at some level, you expect the people who are here 40 plus hours a week to try and look at the things they're dealing with in infrastructure and economic development and human resources and make these kind of recommendations for you to begin working on. Now, admittedly, you get way more constituent contact than we do. If you want to have a time where the constituents can come in here invited and give their thoughts, that's great. This is sort of the beginning of the process. Now, you could say in one respect that if you go along with this, if you're fine with it, we're going to approve it in 2 weeks. So beginning of the process, Steve, it could be over in 14 days. But that's entirely up to you. This is our best shot as staff as to what we think needs to be worked on in the next 3 years in terms of the various operations that we do. And I think, just to disagree with you a little bit, Ed, I think that you could and probably should expect that from us, that we bring these things forward for your consideration. If you ultimately change them, modify them, shoot them down entirely, so be it. You're the elected officials, we're not. But I think, in my opinion, you pay us to bring forward the things that we think from our daily walks here need to be addressed. I do.
And I still have the floor, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I think what you're forgetting is that we work for the people and so do you. It's not that, you know, we know you put in your 40 hours a week here and you do give us your best service and the whole thing. Yes, I understand that. I've been on that side of the fence too. But what I'm saying is that what you should do, or what we should do as a council, is ensure that we're on the track that the citizens want us to follow and not the track that staff wants us to follow. Okay? Do you understand that? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
Well, that's a tough act to follow. So trying to bring some humor in here after a tense conversation, but I'm going to address, some of the conversation I've heard. I think it can be, in this case, an and or but situation. I mean, staff, I think, definitely do need to bring recommendations. That's what you get paid to do. So I think we need to appreciate those recommendations when they come to us. But Steve, you said this, and I agree. We can also, as elected officials, say, thank you for your recommendation, but we want to go a different route based on what we believe our constituency is saying, which I agree with Alderman Wagner. I think sometimes it's very easy, the longer you've been in government, to get into a bubble and forget what our constituents really want. And I agree, I've never had a constituent call me and talk to me at length about a strategic plan. Usually they're upset about a street, they're upset about some type of issue that is affecting their daily life in that moment. But with that said, I think we always need to strive to get more public input. And that was one thing I was going to bring up is I think I would like to see now, but even into the future, when we start talking about strategic plans, try to solicit as much as possible more and more input from the public. Now, I am also a realist. I don't think we're going to get a room full of people, but even if we can get 5 people in a room to genuinely express what they think the city of Marshfield needs to look like in the next 3 years, that's important. So that's one thing. Second thing is I have a love-hate relationship with strategic plans because as it's been hinted to or not so hinted to, they can collect dust. They can be easily forgotten. And sometimes I think we can also create a plan that cherry picks a lot of different things. And I think, to me, a good plan needs to be really, really comprehensive and look at everything. And so I almost look at it, you got to get really laser focused of where you want to go and then start to back up and go backwards and go, okay, now how do I accomplish this goal? So this is where I want to be in 3 years. This is the end destination. And then start moving backwards and going, okay, how do we get there? And I'm not saying that isn't here, but I will say this, I don't think it's as perfectly there as I'd like it to be. And that's just my personal opinion. I'll give you an example. Financial management and infrastructure. Under financial management, we're talking about budget deficits. And under infrastructure, we're talking about a new police department, and we're talking about city garage. So now that's coming under debt, and obviously debt is treated differently than our budget. But I've heard you say, Steve, that we have to get some of these legacy projects, or I forget the term you use, but these projects to be more like 5 to 10 years instead of 2 to 3. So when I look at financial management and infrastructure, I start to ask the question, how do we get the two to almost communicate better with one another to really understand what the overall plan is? And so if we truly believe that we need a city garage, for example, how is the financial plan and also our facilities and infrastructure plan working together? And I don't see that as much in here as I'd like to. So I'd like to see that come out more in the plan, is how are we going to accomplish both? I obviously do worry about our debt. So that's something I think too, I'd like to see more fleshed out, is how are we going to handle the debt situation? But those are some things that I think about when looking at this plan. And then the only other thing is that American Rescue Plan verbiage in there, it's awfully vague. And I know it's probably vague for a reason, because I also sit on the county, and I know from sitting on the county board, there's not a lot of guidelines about the American Rescue Plan and how to spend that money. But it always concerns me when we throw something out there that is a bit vague, and it could easily become a free-for-all. You know, we say we want to maximize the American Rescue Plan. I think that goes without saying. I mean, obviously, we're going to get a check handed to us. We want to maximize it, but what does that look? I would like that fleshed out more, and maybe with the lack of information, hard to do. But those are some thoughts as I'm looking through this plan that I'm thinking through. I personally don't think I would be ready in 2 weeks to vote on this. I would want to look at this more. And personally, I do agree with Alderman Wagner. I would like to see more public input. Thank you.
Mr. Butke, I'm going to jump in ahead of you with my comments, if you don't mind. I look at this as it's not a comprehensive plan. It's a strategic plan, things that we want to look forward, pinpoint on these three things. Obviously, it's not going to be just these three things that we work on in the next 3 years. It's going to be any number of things. It's a sort of a wish list, I guess you could say. And I guess I would just remind the council members that this is your opportunity. If you're not satisfied with this plan, bring some language to Steve, and I'm sure we can take a look at it and see how we can incorporate that into the plan. But just to say that you don't like what's here and you want to vote on something different in 2 weeks, bring something to vote on that's different, okay? Now, Mr. Butsky.
Thank you. I just, a lot of it is communication, and I have to give a attaboy, attagirl, whatever it is, to the staff members. I've seen more communication through Tom's office than I ever have. So we're going in the right direction. But the reason I bring that up is as we get more, now Tom's the only guy, David left, took a different job, so Tom's the lone guy there now. But I can see more communication developing through that department on all of this type of stuff as we go on. Now, I know this is one thing. We have to do a better job, town hall meetings, whatever, we get the citizens. But I got to put it out there to citizens also. Like the bus tour coming up tomorrow night. You know, I've always asked people, well, it's no secret. I solved the world problems at McDonald's and we don't seem to get anywhere with that, but the same stuff over and over. But, you know, they complain about roads. Boy, the city's not doing enough roads. And I asked, and I know Mike's gotten people and some others have gotten people to go on this ride. And you see 3 or 4 pages of road projects. And the gentleman last time when we had, wow, you can't tell me now. So when other citizens speak up and say the city's not doing anything on the roads, he said, boy, that's not true. And the dollar amount, I asked Dan a couple of years ago to put dollar roughly, I don't want to hold anybody to it, but it costs a lot of money. And we definitely are doing stuff. So when there's an opportunity, I would really love to see more citizens. God knows maybe a lot of people don't want to watch this, council meetings and stuff like that, but you do learn a lot of stuff. Call your older person, get some more information. And I know staff is always willing to talk to the people on different things. So communicate, all I'm saying is communication has to work both ways, and we can get better and better with all this. And we're on the right direction. Thank you.
Mr. Witzel, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to see some updating or some adjusting to the communications section in particular. First of all, I guess before I jump into that, I do want to thank you for the effort on this. I I've been on various committees where we've tried to put this together, and I was also on the council when you came forth a few years ago and said, look, we've tried to put this together, we've tried to bring people together, and I know how these discussions go. They go on and on and on and on and on. I'm glad that you at least etched out a framework that we could look at. With that said, though, I would like to see some adjustment to the communication section, perhaps changing the first one from increased level of resident engagement and citizen participation to being more pointed to citizen feedback or citizen involvement or something along those lines. I'm struggling a little bit with the measurables. I don't know exactly what that means. I mean, I guess we're pretty new in the process, so maybe that's yet to be determined based on the analyzed research platforms in the first year of this plan. But we're in a day and age now where I think we need to push stuff to people. It's no longer appropriate to lay it out in front of people and say, here it is. If you didn't know, it's your fault because we put it out there. That's not the day and age we live in. I personally am very busy. Unless my phone dings at me because I just got a text update or an app update about something that happened in the news, I have no idea what's going on.
Oh.
So I think we need to come up with a way. And I know that Nixle worked for Wood County. I think that sort of fell by the wayside. I don't know whatever happened with that. But that's what we need. We need to know, drop of a hat, text message. Oh, there's an accident on Central Avenue. I better take a different route home. Or an update that says, hey, there's this really cool event going on. Don't expect me to go looking for it. Give it to me. Push it to me. And I don't know if that means developing an app for the city and then being able to push out stuff that way. I don't know if that means putting together some sort of an email/text messaging list, something. You don't have to put all the detail in there. It can always be a link that says, here's more information. We've got to get it pushed out to people. So I don't know if that, again, fits into the increased outreach to the public and our stakeholders. I don't know where this all fits. But my esteemed colleague over here to the left brought up a very important comment here, and that is that we really need to have an opportunity for the citizens to talk. And I've heard all sorts of different buzz terms. Let's have a town hall meeting. Let's have a listening session. Let's have a this, that, and the other thing. I've been to various town hall, listening session, whatever things they are. And what I've experienced as a person sitting in the audience is I would express a concern and I would be told why my concern was wrong. Usually by an elected official. I have a concern about this. Well, you're just misunderstanding. This is really what it's all about. That can't be what we provide for the citizens. We need to provide some sort of and I'll use the buzz term, listening session, but it's got to be heavy on the listening. It's got to be what's on your mind? We're not going to say anything. We're going to shut up. We're going to let you talk. And then we can understand what really is driving the concerns of our citizens. The concerns I hear are a block party that ended up with a bad situation, or a dumpster that's overflowed and hasn't been emptied in 2 weeks, or you know, whatever. That's what I hear about. I don't hear about as much the potholes. I also don't hear about the strategic plan, but we need to get an opportunity for people, and I understand we're in the middle of, well, hopefully at the tail end of this COVID situation, and it's tough to bring in 100 people into a room, but we need to have an opportunity for people to speak what's on their mind. And yes, we're going to get the people that says, on this street, there's this pothole and it's been there for 5 years and you need to fix it. But we're also going to hear people saying, in the grand scheme of things, this is something that I think is important for our community and maybe something that you should be working toward over the next 5 years. So it's going to be a mix, but we've got to give people that opportunity. So I really hammered on the communication part of it. I guess those are some things that just jumped out at me as I was going through this the first time, and I would like to see those types of things updated. Thank you.
Mr. Henley.
Thank you, Council President. Steve, I am glad that you and your staff have undertaken the initial steps to develop a strategic plan. For many years, I've been in the position you have been. Instead of looking at a council, I looked at a room full of academics, and they're about the same, no difference. And I see the remarkable step that you have taken with the cemetery, for example. I remember that time because I had the I wouldn't say pleasure, but opportunity to listen to some of the citizens who have loved ones up at the cemetery. And I'm glad to see that attention has been given to that area. For example, I see new signage up there. And I also seen an article or a section on Channel 9 about it. It's this kind of communication that makes me feel a whole lot better that you folks are looking at these things and taking them serious. So I want to thank you for all of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Pete. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Rosendahl.
Thank you, Council President. Steve, I just want to say a attaboy. This actually did exactly what it's supposed to do. Open up discussion, let us talk about it, and bring forth things that probably is important to everybody out in the community. I look at it as, like I said, an attaboy. Good job.
Any further comments or questions? Steve, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, no one to stop, right? No, Quentin, thank you. And I appreciate you saying that, because really there's no staff person in this room or anyone who's not in this room that's been part of this process who will be, experiencing great heartburn if we introduce different elements, if you guys have different ideas, if you want to have more public input and involvement, that's great, that's wonderful. Ultimately, it is your plan. But I think we are charged with doing the legwork to bring something like this to you to show what we think as department and division heads and my position as city administrator, what we think the real key things are I have to address. And regardless of public input, some of these things really need to happen. We need to rebuild 17th Street over by the fairgrounds. We need to do right by our employees in terms of our human resources policy. So some of these things just are what they are, that we see needs that we want to be pursuing and trying to get off the checklist and do right. But other things, I know the citizens have ideas. You guys hear them every day, like I said before, at cafes, restaurants, churches, neighborhood, whatever you want to do is fine. I did see this more as a starting point for the conversation we're having right now. And again, if you want to spend more time on it in 2 weeks or 4 weeks, that's great. We're doing this in September. The plan doesn't take effect until January 1st. There's plenty of time. We're not trying to preclude council involvement, citizen involvement, or anything like that. But this was our best shot in terms of what we think needs to be looked at and accomplished in the next 3 years.
Thank you. I don't see anyone else with comments, so we'll move on to item M. Consideration and possible action on resolution number 2021-54, creating tax incremental district number 13. Approve its project plan and establishing its boundaries, introduced by Josh Miller and David Ferris from Ellers.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to get the project plan up here for us to go through. Basically this is a process that started back in, I think, June or July. It's a complicated process that takes a little while to develop. We've hired Ellers to help us walk through this process. Back in August 17th, we held our joint review board meeting where they convened and we introduced the project to them. We also had a public hearing that same night with the Plan Commission. This is the third step in that process, which would be reviewing the project plan and boundaries with the Common Council, asking you to approve a resolution. And then the last and final step would be the joint review board meeting, which is tentatively scheduled for 2 weeks from now, which is September 28th. But with that, I'll turn it over to Dave. He'll walk through it a little bit and I'll provide some additional context with some of the maps and some of the projects, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
I still got one. Yes. Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here today. If you went to either of the first two meetings, you know that Josh and I kind of do this as a tandem. He's got a lot of good background information and we'll be able to answer a lot of the more detailed questions on what's going on. But as Josh talked about, our history on at least the meeting portion of the process is that we met with the Joint Review Board on August 17th. We went through what their duties were, what the project was about, and they asked a couple questions about, what's a mixed use, how big is the district? Why did it have to be that big? And also there was some comments from the audience that talked about concerns about completing some of the infrastructure projects and where the value was going to come from to be able to do that. And we'll hopefully address that tonight as well. We also talked to the Planning Commission, did the same thing, went through the whole process. Our song and dance was pretty good. I think on the second one, better than the first one even. And we had one question from the committee, And it was more about, if we get grants into the TIF district, how does that affect it? And really what happens is that's a revenue source. Then we collect less increment to get to the end to pay it off. So that actually reduces how much we collect in increment. At the Planning Commission, the vote was 4-1. That's for your information. As far as the plan itself, do you want to push the button so I don't mess them up here? Because remember, I kind of think I even took it off of the screen. This is TIF District number 13. Ron's, I think, shudders every time he hears the number 13 on this one. But this is a proposed mixed-use district of about 230 acres. It's located on the city's southeast side, and I've driven by it twice in the last month, so I know exactly where it is. I'm going to let Josh give a little bit of a better description of what's proposed in that area and where that is.
Yeah, so I'll just move over to the map, and somehow you're rubbing off on me, Dave.
Yep, see? Why I told you to run.
Yeah, so I'll pull up the district just to give you some context of the location of this. This is on the southeast side of the city, bordered on the south by 29th Street, on the north by 21st Street, the east by the TID 7, and then the west is Washington Avenue. The reason that the primary purpose of the location is the mixed-use TIF district, for it to have the reason we're doing a mixed-use TIF district is to allow us to do some newly platted residential development, which will allow us to put infrastructure for single and two-family homes. And we could have higher density than that as well. But we've talked over and over about the need for single-family homes and lots. And there's a severe shortage in the community, and this would allow us to help out with the infrastructure to develop those lots. This was an area that is well suited for that. There's about 20 acres of developable land, but its proximity to other uses is what allows us to create this district here. You can't just create a residential TIF district and be able to develop a residential subdivision. You have to have other uses, which is a mix of commercial, industrial, and residential. The maximum newly platted area can only be 35% of the district. So ideally, we'd be able to do just a residential TIF, but we're not allowed to by state statute. So the reason that this is also as large as it is we want to incorporate some future road projects. Hume Avenue is in need of reconstruction or repair at some point in the next 20 years. That's likely to happen. If there's enough increment in the TIF, that will help us pay for that instead of paying for that out of debt or general fund. Same with 21st Street. So those are a couple projects that we wanted to include in this TIF that if we have enough increment, we could pay for through with TIF dollars. And then we also wanted to incorporate the 3 properties that we carved out at TID 7. So that's why we extend all the way east of Galvin Avenue. And that's really the reason that it's as big as it is, to do one TIF district and accomplish all of those things. So it's about 230 acres, excluding the wetlands. And a lot of it is existing development, but that was really crafted so we could really capture the newly platted residential area.
Oh, do a page up. Let's go back 3. Isn't there a page up or something?
Yes. Can't quite get it to here.
Please. Okay. Well, on page 3, we kind of talk about the estimated project cost. So the total project costs that are included in the plan is about $11.3 million. Now, a lot of those projects are in there. When we'll get that schedule, we'll kind of show you how it's laid out. There's some projects that are definitely part of the project plan that we're hoping to undertake with the initial residential development. And then there's some projects that are out in categories that like to be determined when they're going to be done or if they're going to be done. So we'll talk about more on that when we get to page 24. As far as the incremental value, the staff has come up with what they feel is a realistic development of the properties that comes up with about $28 million over the life of the project or of the TIF district. And so that $28 million would be what would be used to take care of the columns that actually have a year on it, not the ones that are the TBDs. As far as the way that cash flow goes, and we'll just kind of briefly look at that at the end, if everything comes in as it says in the project plan and everything is the projects that are expected to be done are are done, the district could close a couple of years early, but that obviously is one of those crystal balls. And let's see, we on, where's your down arrow here? Is that the project one? It's so small. So then we're going to get to the projects, and I think I'll have, there's a couple things ahead of time just for information. You know, we do have the parcel list in here of what makes up the district, but one of the tests you have to do to make sure that you can continue to add TIF districts is called the 12% test. That's actually on page 13 and on the screen. And right now the city is at about 7.73% after this district if it were approved. So you still have room in the future if there's other districts, just so you have that in your mind if anything comes up like that. And there's some listings in here that just talks about potential projects. I won't get into those. You can read those. They're good bedtime reading probably. Here's a map of where the projects will take place. And I think Josh will give you a little history of what's going on there.
Yeah, so I worked with the Public Works Department on just really identifying some potential infrastructure projects and needs in this general area. And that also helped us form the boundary of the district. So as we talked about on the west side with the newly platted area, that would primarily be the infrastructure, putting in the roads, sanitary, sewer, water, stormwater for that subdivision. Also allowing us to construct a trail, which would go through from 21st Street to Veterans Parkway, which would expand our trail network system. Hume Avenue improvement would be another project, which would be included in this project plan. We also have some stormwater ditching that would be needed just down on the south end, north of 29th Street. There's some railroad maintenance that we would be already obligated to do to take care of in this area. That would be TIF eligible. So those are project costs that we already undertake now, but because it's part of a TIF, those could be TIF eligible expenses. Reconstruction of 21st Street, north of the Wood County land area. That's a road that's in rough shape, and this project would allow us to reconstruct that. And then there's some stormwater management areas along there as well. Additionally, the two projects, or the one project that's outside of the district, which we can do a project within a half mile of the boundary, would be the Nikolai Avenue and 21st Street. That whole Norwood subdivision, that road is a number of years old and is got some significant potholes in it already and could use some repair. So that would be another possible project that could be incorporated. And then the property on Galvin Avenue in Yellowstone, it's a city-owned piece of property. There are some utilities in there that could be relocated. Those could be eligible project costs as well. So again, to reiterate what David said is not all of these have to be undertaken if they're in the project plan, but putting them in the project plan allows us to undertake them at this date. And obviously the council it'd be up to the council whether or not those projects move forward, and up to staff to ensure that there's enough increment to pay for those projects. And in some cases, like the street improvements for the residential subdivision, there'd be a development agreement. So there'd be some requirements by the developer to meet certain standards in order to make sure that we're going to recoup our investment for that new infrastructure.
So the project list is a couple pages down here. Blow that up a little. It's about as big. Oh. You have it in your packet as well. So the first three columns where it says phase 1, 2, and 3 are really the projects that staff feels is necessary to get the district going. The projects that are more out in the TBD area are really the projects where the city's going to have increased development to have those undertaken. So, you know, the most important part is that phase 1 where the residential is being undertaken. As Josh said, there's going to be a developer's agreement along with that. So, you know, the increment from that development will pay for those projects and hopefully some of the projects in phase 2 and 3. I think one thing that we want to make sure is clear to you is that even though there's projects in here, they won't necessarily be undertaken unless there's a development to pay for them. And the one thing that I think is important for you also to know as far as project plans go, if you include things in here that are potential projects in the future that you may not have money for right now that you can see, the one thing that you can do by having them included in the project plan is it at least has you contemplate that you may have this a project cost. What that does for you in the future is that as you come back in the future and you wanted to do these projects and you didn't include them, you would actually have to do a whole new project plan. And yeah, that's only $10,000-$15,000, but it's $10,000-$15,000 less that you would have to spend. So if you contemplate at least, according to the Department of Revenue at this time, that they may be a future cost, you would not have to do a project plan. But if the district doesn't do well, you may not do them at all. So we want to make sure you know that some of those projects are in the TBD columns because you may not have the increment to actually get them done. The phase 1, 2, and 3 are, I think, the ones that staff has determined are the real important things to this development. And then just to kind of go through the last schedules here quick, and I won't get too far in the weeds as far as the financials because I think people will glaze over pretty good with that. Where's the one that does the full screen again? Oh, it's okay. So this really small schedule, hopefully you have in front of you, just kind of shows the development assumptions that staff came up with how many residential units going to be potentially built a year. There's some commercial and industrial that are also in here that staff has tried to be conservative as far as when they would go in. Those development numbers flow into the increment projection, which the tax rate that's in there is based off of a worksheet that is done for the Department of Revenue and at tax time calculates out how much increment. If you take those numbers, which comes up to about 9 million in this calculation in the orange bottom of 27, that flows into the cash flow statement. And I'll just briefly talk about that. Is the increment is obviously the biggest number that comes in on this cash flow. On the left side, there's a little bit of debt that pays for that infrastructure that we're talking about putting in phases 1, 2, and 3. There's a potential municipal revenue obligation, which is a developer incentive type of thing that staff thinks needs to trigger one of these developments. So if those projects get done and that revenue comes in, that's where you see over there on 2041 that we have the yellow line. It's a crystal ball, but if that development occurs and we only do the phase 1, 2, 3, that's would get you closed successfully. You want to add something?
Yeah, I get a question. Just as far as we talked about projects, project costs. The initial project costs that we have incurred already is the creation of the district, which is Eller Services. Some of the other project costs we'd be looking to incur probably prior to a development agreement might be a wetland delineation for the newly platted residential area. There's some stormwater ditching that would be a pretty low cost thing, but this Public Works Department wants to clean up that area along Hume Avenue. And then possibly some engineering or some platting costs, things like that for the city's property. So pretty nominal costs initially, but those would be things that we may, in the interest of time, want to get going on some of those things if the council approves it. So.
Happy to take any questions at this time or answer questions about some of the things we talked about.
First, let's go with Mr. Buck, your motion.
A motion to approve, and then I've got it.
Okay, and we have a second from Mr. Hendler on that. So, Mr. Bucky, your comments.
Yeah, Josh, I see the value per home is estimated to be $200,000. Just a question for my information. What does it cost to build a house now? It must be close. I mean, you don't get much, you just look at with the lumber prices and Quentin would probably know more about this, but do you have any idea what like a 2-bedroom house cost or a Q?
Yeah, a 2-bedroom house would probably, to build new, would probably be over that.
Okay.
And the reason we were a little conservative on the numbers, we wanted these to be starter homes. I mean, they're not affordable homes, so I want to be clear that it's not affordable housing, but it is more along the starter type of homes. And the reason that they were only looking at about a $200,000 value is our assessment ratio is so skewed. So if they build a $250,000 home, we'd be hopeful to get around a $200,000 assessed value. And that's what our increment is, how much we recoup for the increment is based on.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a lot of ether in this, it's about, well, we think it's this and we think it's that, but I think the key to this thing is something you just mentioned tonight. You just met, I remember when I talked to you, when I spoke from that podium at the joint meeting of the taxing entities, I asked you how much of that 2.6 million was for property acquisition for this development, and you said none. Tonight you mentioned another word called developer's agreement. So am I correct in assuming, and I know how dangerous assuming is, but that you're not going to purchase the land, you're going to sign a developer's agreement with the land, on the owner of the land, which this is going to go on, and that they will agree to certain conditions to provide affordable housing. Is that correct?
With the exception that it wouldn't be affordable housing, it would be starter homes. But yes, that would be the intent, is to provide
and you
standard homes.
While you're there, just define starter home.
Well, something that you'd be looking at a starter price for a home, but like I said, probably around the between $200,000 and $250,000 range would be what we'd be looking at.
Okay, so what's going to happen then is the developer's incentive that you mentioned in the work program on page 14 or 15, I guess it was, that developer's incentive is that we're going to put in all the infrastructure and they sell the lots, right?
Sell and build, potentially.
Sell and build. And one other question for you on that is, do we know what their marketing plan is? Do we know that, because all of this depends on the increment of selling at least 8 houses per year. And if that doesn't happen, guess where that money to pay for that debt's going to come from?
Correct, and that's where the details in the development agreement.
And that's where the risk is.
Right, correct. But that's why we have to, when we draft the development agreement and get to that point, we're not to that point yet. But that would be.
I can't see how we can actually pass this without knowing what's in that developer's agreement, so that we can feel assured that it's something acceptable and that we're not taking all of the risk.
Well, we wouldn't take on the infrastructure costs without a development agreement. That would be.
And then yeah, but you want us to pass the TIF district tonight. Yeah. So we pass the district, we find out we don't like the developer's agreement, and all of a sudden we've got a district that we're not going to do anything with.
Correct, but if you don't pass the district,
that's the problem.
We would be out of the expense of creating the district, and that wouldn't be a TIF eligible expense. And there's other benefit beyond just the mixed use portion of it to provide.
I really don't want to vote on that thing until you've got a developer's agreement in hand. Thank you.
Let me pipe in on this too. As far as the developers agreements, you'll see in most TIF districts that you have to create the district to be able to do a developer's agreement with a developer. So, if you create a district and you get a developer to come in here, you're going to wait a whole lot longer time to get something going. If you have a developer, it's a cart before the horse. You have to have the TIF in place so that you can have that developer's agreement. And that's what's going to pay.
I'm sorry, I see it the other way around, especially if the success of the development depends on that developer.
I can tell you that typically the TIF is created first. In most of the state, the TIF is created before any developers agreements are agreed to.
Mr. Butke, you're up next.
Thank you. I would, Mr. Rosen did seeing how you're in that business. What do you see the house market? I think there's a demand for houses, is there not?
Yes. Josh is right. I mean, they may appraise out at 200, but it's probably going to cost 250 to 275 to build a house when you would call it a starter home. Anywhere from $159, $179 a square foot. It's probably a pretty good guesstimate. So you take that for a 1,800 square foot house, and that's what you get.
Is it on? Yeah, okay. When I was on the Economic Development Board with Josh, we talked about there's definitely a need for new housing in the city. So I guess I understand Mr. Wagner's concern, but I'm pretty confident it's going to be okay from what I've heard of the housing need in Marshfield.
Mrs. Spiros.
Thank you. I'm trying to clarify in my head what a starter home is, because I think Mr. Bucky asked, what's it cost to build a 2-bedroom house? And that was $250,000. The other subdivision we're putting up, the houses only have to be 1,800 square feet, and you told us those are all going to be valued at $400,000. So what's the difference? I guess I'm not understanding the difference. How are you making those homes out there at 1,800 square feet valued at $400,000? Then you want to tell me that you can build one now for $250,000 and call that a starter home, and it's only got 2 bedrooms. I'm trying to figure out what you're talking about.
Yeah, and I think in most cases, they would be possibly smaller than 1,800 square feet. I think he was just throwing out a number, just as a random number. But, and I think most of the homes in our city subdivision will be larger than 1,700 square feet. What we wanted to do is set a minimum threshold, so it would entice people to consider it. The homes that I think will be in there will be 2,000 plus in most cases. So I think in some of these starter homes, we're probably looking, 1,500, 1,600 square feet. And they're, maybe they're not the high-end finishes. I mean, a lot of the times the cost is based on the finish, materials and things like that.
Can I pipe in for just a second? Yeah, that would be your things like putting linoleum in instead of wood, or putting wolf in instead of putting in LG, that those things add up, and the appraiser will look at that and cause that home to be worth this much more. I would guess it's probably going to be more like a 1,200 square foot home with an unfinished basement. And then somebody would come in and put a basement in, and you'd have 1,000 square feet, but you only get 500 out of that. So in the grand scheme of things, you would get to 1,700, 1,800 square feet. So, I mean, it's kind of where that starts. I mean, a lot of our homes didn't have finished basements. We just eventually did it. And that's where you get more footage, and that's that home.
Mrs. Spiros, are you finished?
Yes, thank you. I'm sorry.
I
worked midnight shift last night. I
Okay. You look like you had more thoughts going on there. That's why I asked. Mr. Fisher, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. President. This has been really good conversation. I just want to, I guess, reiterate one point that I thought was really good, and that is, I think we have to understand when we hear the term affordable housing or starter home, I think different people will have different perceptions of what that means. What I think we really need to say is we need homes for workforce. And that doesn't, we need homes that priced very differently. Whether that is 250, whether that's 500,000, I think we need homes. And I've said this at EDP, I'm on the Economic Development Board. We need homes. We are competing with Wausau, we are competing with Stevens Point, we are competing with Wisconsin Rapids. People are being, they're being recruited to come work here, and we need homes. And so, obviously, I've said this before, I feel very strongly that we need, when we were looking at the city subdivision, we need to have some homes that are more affordable for people who maybe can't get a $400,000, $500,000 home. And I think that's what you're trying to accomplish here. At least that's what I'm sensing. I will make one comment. I do agree with Alderman Wagner. It does seem backwards. I understand from both of you, that's the way it's normally done. It seems extremely odd. I can accept the fact because most of what government does seems odd to me from time to time. So I'll accept that. But I do get concerned because I agree with Alderman Wagner. If I don't like the developers agreement, we do have now a TIF district that isn't being used. So my only question is, if that were to happen, what happens with the TIF district? It's just literally.
Well, there's still other increments that will be obtained through development. So there's other projects that are going to take place in this district that will get increment from that development. that development will eventually pay off whatever the costs were that have been incurred and pay off the debt. If we don't put any infrastructure in, we're not going to put any infrastructure without a development agreement, without some assurances. So the risk is pretty minimal to adopt this plan. If nothing happens, building will go on, the city will go on. If increment takes place or construction takes place, that increment will be used to pay off what we've paid to Ehlers, and if we do a wetland delineation. And then we do anticipate some significant increment over the next 20 years in this area. And even if like I said, if the residential part doesn't happen, I'm pretty confident it will. If that didn't happen for some reason, whatever increment we do have, whatever revenue we do get, we can use for paying off Hume and paying off 21st Street. We can help subsidize some of those costs, but those streets are going to need to be repaired. So worst case scenario is we'll help pay off some of the costs for those projects.
Okay, I don't see any further comments. The motion is to approve resolution number 2021-54. Any further comments? Please vote. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item N is a request to approve budget resolution number 06-2021, amending the 2021 budget to cover unbudgeted legal fees, presented by Ron Aumann, Finance Director. Ron.
Thank you. In front of you, you've got Budget Resolution 06-2021, and I alluded this to the Finance Committee before presenting. So these are sunk costs. These are costs we've expended during the year, and now we're looking at amending the budget to make room for them, which, speaking of things that sound backwards, this is one of them. So we have three main legal accounts where we put our fees. The first one listed we created this year when the Ethics Committee was created, because the council will now have some legal expenses to put in there. So what's in there for year to date is the $37,451, primarily for the requested hearings and removal of the mayor. It does include the setup of the ethics committees and some other minor items. The second one is the city attorney. I've got a laundry list of all the things that Wolfgram and Gomoki do for us as a part of routine city business. Obviously, they've been called on much more this year to help assist in the other manners. We're asking for a budget amendment to $260,000. And then the last one is an account that usually has some pretty minor activity. It's von Briesen, usually for a labor attorney. They review contracts, look at employment agreements, those kind of things. So the largest expense there has been the final run out of the police union grievance. And we're looking at increasing that from the $15,000 budget, which would be typical for labor agreements, contracts, up to $115,000. So take any questions.
Mr. Butke, your motion.
Motion to approve.
And a second from Mr. Fisher. And Mr. Fisher, you have a comment.
Yeah, I appreciate the explanation, Ron, because I think when you see this on the agenda, you can start to ask some questions as a citizen as to why is there such a large change in our legal fees, and why are we having to amend that from our budget? So I appreciate the explanation. Can you just get very specific, more for the public who may be watching this? Can you break down how much is actually going towards employment law versus general law? Can you give us those amounts?
Sure. I think most of what you're looking for is kind of laid out there. Just kind of go back through the buckets. So for the first one, so the year to date is $37,451. Of that amount, I'd say $34,000. The vast majority is for the council hearings and the removal of the mayor. The middle part, that one's a lot harder to break down, and I don't allocate it out. But if you look at all the things that Wolfgram and Gomoki do for us, it's the court, it's those kind of things. So I didn't prepare a budgeted list of that. That's kind of the routine business.
And I didn't allocate any of it to the additional parts with the mayor or the union grievance. So I'm not trying to be evasive there, but each month we've got 10 or 11 pages of bills, contact with council, a case listing of everything going through the municipal court, requests for advice, a review of contracts. That's a pretty extensive list. And then the last one, so we've got, so I included the the inception to date number for the union grievance case because that'd be the first question we had. So for the year to date in July, of the 86,166, I'd have to go back and look at the detail there, but I would say of that amount, about $10,000 is kind of the routine labor, and maybe even less, routine labor, contract reviews, employment reviews, and those kind of things that we'd expect in a normal year.
I can add two things to that. Number one, we can certainly get the information from the Von Briesen bills if you'd like to see that, and we could give you a synopsis of those dollar amounts. The other thing I'll add to the part about Attorney Wolfgram, I don't know the actual amount of his overage that would tie to the job function test and the police chief issues, but I can tell you he was involved. We wanted him to be involved. I know one of the things council has made clear in the last couple of years is they want him to be able to answer your questions and deal with the circumstances at hand, even if in fact the labor law council is leading the charge, because ultimately he's going to have to represent the city on the actions that this body might take, and he was involved to some degree with the PFC in some of those discussions as well. So I can try and find that out. I don't have a better number than Ron has, but know that some of those overage funds related to his billings came from those two items.
Any further questions for Ron or comments? Okay, the motion is to approve budget resolution number 06-2021. Please vote. Mr. Fire?
I don't have anything. Yes.
A computer problem?
My phone went nuts.
Okay, there we go. That motion carries.
Thank you.
Item O, first reading of ordinance number 1452, amending sections 9-36, 9-37, 9-39, 9-40, and 9-41 of the Marshfield Municipal Code pertaining to alcohol beverage operators licenses, presented by Deb Hall, City Clerk. Deb.
Thank you. In 2019, Wisconsin Act 166 was approved. And what this act does is it allows a municipal governing body to delegate authority to issue operator licenses to a designated municipal official. This ordinance would delegate the authority to the city clerk in order to issue operator licenses. It also deletes sections 9-36, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, because as we were going through our code, we noticed that these were duplications that are already listed in other parts of our code. It also removes all reference to license fees because we have moved all our license fees onto our fee schedule. So this is just some cleanup work there. It also spells out the appeal process. So if an operator is denied a license, it walks you through the appeal process and what has to be done as far as letters and going before the JL committee. This was presented to the Judiciary and License Committee at their last meeting, and they have referred it to the Common Council for consideration and action. This is a first reading.
Does anyone have any questions for Deb on this matter? Seeing none, we'll move on to item number P. First reading of ordinance number 1465, amending section 631 of the Marshfield Municipal Code for outdoor fires, presented by Pete Floody, Deputy Fire Chief.
Thank you. The changes and updates to this ordinance were kind of born out of age of the ordinance and also a few issues that were identified by both the fire department and police department, along with the Parks and Rec department. This ordinance deals primarily with bonfires, recreational fires in the city of Marshfield. So I'll just run through the changes. I know you all have a copy of the cover letter in your packet, so I'll just read through the changes quick. So in sub-chapter 4, we changed the word shall be grounds for extinguishment to may be grounds for extinguishment. This pertains to smoke complaints. We do get a lot of complaints for smoke complaints, and we arrived to find the fire pit is well within the realm of the rest of the ordinance. So we didn't see a need to make them put out the fire. A lot of these arise from just neighborhood complaints, so and disputes. So also a change throughout the ordinance. We did add the police department in several places throughout. Due to the fact that they get just as many, if not more, complaints than the fire department actually does. So we just wanted to add them into this ordinance as a means to enforce this ordinance. In subsection 10, I'm sorry, we added at the request of the Parks and Rec department, mainly due to people more recently bringing portable fire pits to city parks and having bonfires. So subsection 10 would prohibit this practice unless authorization is granted by Parks and Rec. Then we move on to subchapter 11. That's an addition as well. It defines and prohibits unattended fires. We didn't have a definition in our ordinance for that, so we just wanted to add that in there. And again, subsection 12, another addition. So this adds an enforcement to the ordinance, as there was really no recourse for repeat offenders of the ordinance. So that pretty much sums it up. And again, this is the first reading. I'll take any question.
Any questions or comments for Chief Leddy? I think it's a timely change, because I noticed the other night there were 3 or 4 fires I could see looking out the windows of my house. And so I think it's a good time of year to start looking at this.
Right.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Item Q, review a possible increase in certain taxi fares, presented by Steve Barr, City Administrator.
Thank you, Council President. Prior to 2013, the shared ride taxi fares were looked at and oftentimes increased, or at least considered for increase on an annual basis as part of the budget process. This helped the city subsidize operations. Now remember, for those of you who've been around for a little while, you know this, there's 3 parts to the taxi budget. There's the federal and state grants, which have been slowly dropping over time, but provide still more than half of the revenue for the service. There's user fees, which are the taxi fares. And then if necessary, there's a local share. The city makes up the difference. So we try to minimize that difference to the greatest degree possible, while still providing affordable rides for our citizens who need taxi service. So anyway, Marshfield Public Transit plays a great role in meeting our transportation needs, especially those who are seniors, people with disabilities, and children get a lot of rides too. That's at a reduced fare. So to keep the amount of tax levy funds as low as possible, we look at these periodically. The last time that the taxi fares were increased was in 2018. And 4 years ago, back in 2017, when we looked at it, we saw the need for a slight increase. We don't like to do large increases, again, because it's a group of people, the larger share of the riders, who really depend upon the service, and we don't want to harm them. We want them to get the transportation they need. So right now, here's what we're proposing for January 1st of 2022, just floating it by you tonight, no action, but just seeing how you feel about it. There would ultimately have to be a public hearing held where all the residents would be notified. We'd certainly want people who are most affected to get the chance to weigh in, talk to you folks, come to a meeting, express their concerns. But right now, regular fares are $5. We'd say that we should keep that. We talked to our provider, running from Viroqua, and they said that $5 is really kind of the top of the line for what they see across their 20-plus communities, so no need to go beyond that. The reduced fare right now is $2.85 for seniors, persons with disabilities, and children. We're looking at increasing that to $3, so a 15-cent increase, effective 1/1/22. And then the agency fee, that's for just certain outfits, companies per se, that buy in bulk, and oftentimes what they do is they, as I understand it, there aren't many in this category, but they will then be able to get reimbursement through some other means as part of of their billing for the services that they provide. I think it's generally nonprofits, people in the business of human services. Again, there aren't many of these, but the agency fee right now is $8, and we would look at increasing that to $10. Again, that's pretty commensurate with what the running is finding in other communities. $10 is right in the mix with what their other 20-plus communities charge for agency fares. So looking to see if you have any questions or concerns on this. If you don't, I guess my suggestion would be that we be authorized to move ahead and schedule a public hearing in late October, invite all the residents to come out and express their concerns about what would be increases really in two categories. The main one that they would be concerned about would be the reduced fares going from $2.85 per ride to $3 per ride. And the agency fare, we would notify those affected as well. That would be my recommendation, but there's no action needed tonight. Just want to make sure this is something that you would be supportive of considering.
I just wanted to add that I was involved in the meeting with Running Incorporated the other couple of weeks ago, I guess it was now. And it was very interesting to see it from their perspective. They have increased costs as well as everyone else, and difficulty. One of them would be difficulties in finding employees to work for the current rates. And one of the things that surprised me the most was just the difference that 15 cents makes in how much trouble it is for them to have to make change using nickels and dimes as opposed to having it, rounded off to a 50 cent or a full dollar amount. So there are a lot of things that we looked at there. And as Steve mentioned, the rates are commensurate with what other communities are charging for same services.
That's a good point. If I can add too, it's just only one of several things we're looking at to try and control costs. We want to provide this service on the long term. People depend on it. The people who use this service and get the reduced fares, whether it's to doctor's appointments, whether it's to groceries, whatever, this is important to their lives and being able to live on their own. So we don't want to cause problems. We also look at things in terms of what hours of service get the most customers. And I think Running pointed out to us at that meeting, Nick, that there are certain hours that they think maybe we could back off on a little bit because they have very little demand. So we look at all the ways to try and control costs, but still provide the service to the people who need it the most.
Mrs. Spiros, your comments.
Thank you, Council President. I just have a couple of things. I'm not understanding the agency fee. So you have a nonprofit that pays $8 for what? What do they get for the $8? Like 5 people from their agency rides in the taxi? I don't understand what that is.
No, I know this was explained a few years ago and I should have prepared better for it. I think the last I knew from 4 years ago, there was only one agency that was in this boat. It's a large agency that provided a lot of rides. They buy them in bulk. They get some reimbursement from somebody for the service as part of what they do, what their nonprofit provides. So I'll look into that more before we get there. It's not like, you think about ODC and others. That's not who we're talking about, I don't believe. We're talking about human service providers that fit into a certain category. And like I said, my understanding is the $8 didn't make anybody blink 4 years ago, whoever this affected. But I will get some more information for you. I apologize for that.
No, that's okay. I just didn't understand. It doesn't make I can't figure out what that actually is. But then secondly, and I because we're talking about this, I feel like I do need to say this. I do still want to see Running, is it Running? That's
yeah, it's Running.
Yeah. Oh my God. I do still want to see them tweak some of their services, because I have to say that I probably within the last 6 to 8 months had at least, and I brought a couple of these to you, 4 or 5 complaints about the taxi service. And most of this was in regard to people who are disabled. So I'm just going to put that out there that, if we're going to increase the fees to the people who are paying for a ride, I hope that, the services, some of the issues they have are going to improve also.
Two things. One, in answer to your previous question, it is per ride. Thinking about that's what they pay per ride, which is more than the normal fare and more than the reduced fare because of what they do when they do collect money back for that. As far as what you're saying, anytime you have any complaints, anytime any member of the council has complaints about services, about the way someone is treated, about how long it takes to be picked up, please let us know. We follow up on those all the time. to make sure that the provider is doing the best job possible. When running took over a number of years ago, there were some initial bumps in the road. There were some concerns about people waiting, longer periods of time for a ride, sitting at the clinic, waiting to be picked up and taken back home, waiting at the grocery store for their return trip. I think we've worked through most of those a while ago. I don't really hear of many of those anymore. I think Amy Krogman picks up on some of those and then refers them to the provider for follow-up. But the number of those has dropped off a lot. I think running has kind of got a pretty good system that they have avoided some of those pitfalls. But anytime you hear some, please let's follow up on them.
Mr. Butke.
Yeah, I personally don't see a problem with this, but I got to tell you, my constituents, some of my constituents are Cedar Rail. I can make a difference to them. Can we, Steve, get that out to them, what the plans are? So, because I don't know if they're all going to keep up on this. If we could get something written to them, this is the proposed fees. And, now Cedar Rail, I have had no complaints for years. Not to say they're not calling staff here or anything, but I'm not getting.
Yeah, and this goes back to what was said earlier when we talked about the strategic plan. I mean, communication. We could put a public hearing notice in the News Herald and call ourselves legal, but we want to do a lot more, especially for this population. Cedar Rail and Parkview come to mind, but there's other avenues that we can advertise that will be more likely to reach the people than some of the things that they're less likely to check. So we can hit the platforms that are going to most connect.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. I just want to echo something that Alderwoman Spiro said. I just today, actually, and late last week, I received complaint about the service. So it isn't ending. One of the complaints I got was they waited a couple hours to even get a ride. So maybe the city's not hearing about it, but there's still issues. So I think moving forward, we just need to continually address that. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you, Steve. There are several other housing, group housing arrangements in the city other than Cedar Rail. I would like to get something into as many of the apartment complexes as we can, because they do take it. I'm a little bit surprised to hear about the complaints because for the first time in 2 years, I haven't received any. I mean, it's just amazing. I used to get them all the time, but I haven't received any complaints about it so far. But I would like you to go to those places, I think, Norris Manor, Wildwood View, with all those. I've got like 5 or 6 of those big apartment complexes in my district within a stone's throw of each other. And I do see the cabs up there all the time. So I'd like to see them aware of this too.
Yeah, we talk a lot about social media, Facebook and other things, and the website in terms of reaching the population. This might be one of those cases where we need to do good old-fashioned pound the pavement in some of these places and get flyers out there.
Bulletin boards, yes.
What'd you call it?
On the bulletin boards.
Yeah, those kind of ways to get the word out to people who are most likely to be affected. I think when they hear it, when they realize that we're talking about a 15-cent increase from 4 years ago, they will find that to be acceptable. But again, their livelihoods, their ability to stay home and be independent, depend on this, so I get it.
Mr. Butke.
Thank you. The comment Mr. Fisher made, that type of thing is not right, but I can tell you the complaints over the years. There's riders don't understand a shared ride. So to keep the rates down, it's not like a taxi service where you go pick up one person and take them to where they go. They try to get a couple people to different areas. Now, when you have complaints an hour or anything like that, that's got to be dealt with. But if there's anything, just make sure when people call you that it is a shared ride system. And so it's a lot different than the taxis.
Mr. Fire.
Yeah, thank you. On our Committee on Aging, we have taxi on our agenda every month. And, I'd say 5-6 years ago, we would probably average about 50 to 20 complaints in a month's time. That's before they stopped running to Toma and someplace else. And they took 2 taxis off the highways and they kept them in town. Most people don't understand that it's a shared ride. And if you want a ride to get to the clinic at 8 o'clock, it's probably a bad time to expect it to be right on time. And I guess the committee would like to hear something if there were problems, because I go around the community center with the seniors, and the ones that I know that are riding don't seem to be complaint. They say that the new taxis are nice, they're cleaner, they're working fine. So if there's problems, we'd like to know about it too as a committee on aging, because we will pursue it, and we'll get Mr. Running to come to our meeting and we'll talk to him.
There's two things that I would say to that. A good point. One is if we know about individual concerns, we can actually look back, find out what happened, talk, they can talk to the driver, they can work the issue out. If there's an apology needed, that might be coming. The other thing, though, is if there's broad things, if people are not being picked up on time in general from some of these places, and I mentioned doctors, clinics, grocery stores, or those kind of things, we'd like to address it in the broader sense. But I'm with you. I mean, we're really not hearing a whole lot. There was a time back 5 or 6 years ago when our office, either the mayor or Amy, on the mayor's behalf, would get phone calls fairly frequently about people who weren't picked up on time or who felt that they were, not treated well. We don't hear much of that here anymore. If you're hearing them, we need to hear them because we want to make sure that those things are dealt with.
And I'll just add that we did speak with Mr. Running about these issues, and part of it is that they're not fully staffed, and if you don't have somebody to drive the cab, you can only put out so many cabs at a time. And the other thing that he's looking at is, like Steve said, adjusting the hours. Maybe we don't need to have somebody working at midnight. We can adjust those hours and have that person have an additional cab on duty at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Those are things that he's looking at to try to improve his service. Mrs. Spiro.
Okay, just to clarify, since I kind of brought up the whole topic, I want to make sure that the complaints I received had nothing to do with being picked up or picked up on time. The complaints I received was somebody is in a handicapped wheelchair. Their wheelchair was not strapped down by the driver. That was one of them. That's a serious, actually very serious problem. And the second one that I can recall right off the top of my head was the person was handicapped in a wheelchair, needed transportation to the emergency room like at 1:30 in the morning, and there was literally no handicap accessible vehicles at that time in the morning. So those are the complaints that I received. They weren't anything to do with pickup on time or delay in pickup. So I just want to clarify that since we kind of got off the rail talking mostly about that.
Thank you.
Okay, item R, a report on recent summer hours trial period at City Hall, presented by Steve, our city administrator.
Thank you, Council President. Well, you did authorize us to do a 4-week trial, and we did from the week of August 9th through September 3rd, the day before Labor Day weekend, here at City Hall. I'm here to give you a recap. First of all, I want to thank you for allowing that. It's a good way to find out whether that's workable for the future, whether there's pitfalls, those types of things, and you learn a lot from pilot programs. So this is a summary of what we learned in the past 4 weeks. First of all, I started out by creating a summer hours team, a group of people here representing all the different departments to monitor how this is going. They met several times during the 4-week period, I understand. And they talked about issues. Were we addressing them? Were we dealing with things that were brought up by citizens or by other people who use City Hall? Maybe it's a vendor, maybe it's a contractor, to make sure that we're on top of things. Before we actually started this, though, there were some adjustments made, notifications made to try and make this as successful as possible. Oh, I'm not, I thought it was on the screen here. I'm not.
One's down.
How do I switch back?
It's not used.
Oh.
It's not you, Steve.
Thank you. I take it. Yeah. It did freeze me, though. Right in my tracks. Oh no, something popped up. That wasn't there a minute ago.
No, I'm not on the clock.
Not here. The other way.
I could just read it, but that's not as exciting as looking at it.
It's really not that exciting.
I knew somebody was
Whether
going to say
you
that.
put it up there or not.
I was almost hoping somebody would say that. Thank you.
While we're waiting, a musical number by Mr. Bart.
I don't know any singing. I don't think you'd want to hear me sing. Maybe I will just, oh, there we go. There we go. Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, so I mentioned the summer hours team. We looked at doing some adjustments and notifications in advance to give it the best possibility of being successful. Here's some of the things we did. Department heads worked with staff on any individual schedule needs. Remember, everybody still had to work a 40-hour week. So there were some people, on Monday through Thursday, well, can I, take my normal lunch and work longer hours? And we had some shuffle around to make sure that people were getting in their 40 hours for each and every week. We actually saw some success from that in the sense that we had good lunch coverage on Monday through Thursday, maybe better than we normally do. We used all city communication platforms to inform the citizens. We used our website, Facebook, all those things. We told our vendors, contractors, post office, and others as appropriate what to expect, that they wouldn't be walking in the door on Friday afternoon, so they weren't caught off guard. Signage was posted to advise customers. The departments outside of City Hall, streets, wastewater, and others were asked to alter their timing of the trips to City Hall when possible, when looking for assistance from us. Many employees added taglines to their email indicating the summer hours, so anybody who got our emails knew that what to expect during that 4-week period. And technology staff, as we'll talk about in a minute, tracked the phone calls and the attempted visits to City Hall during those 4 Friday afternoons. Here's what we observed. During the 4 Friday afternoons, cameras out in front of the building, or capturing people trying to come to the front door, observed a total of 43 vehicles in the parking lot. Here's what that represented. 30 of those cars, somebody apparently walked to the front door. In 10 cases, they didn't approach the front door. Now, I've been told that some people have parked here at City Hall. I don't know this because I sit in the back, but some people park here and go elsewhere. They might park here and go to the church across the street or somewhere else, or for some reason, they don't end up coming to the front door. They couldn't read the sign without coming to the front door, so presumably it was another purpose. And then 3 people came to the front door and used the drop box to make payments or put something in there for one of our staff. So a total of 33 people on those 4 afternoons, or about 8 per afternoon, came to our front door. There were a total of 77 incoming calls from outside of this building during those 4 afternoons. 31 of those were made to the city's main number, the 486-2000 number. And those represent a lot of different things. Some people get that number from afar. Maybe they're doing cold calls, or they're searching for something. Of the remaining calls, only 2 of the 9 departments had 6 or more incoming calls during that 4-week period, and they were the city clerk's office and the development services department. None of the other 7 functions in this building saw more than 6 calls during those 4 afternoons. So for the most part, the call volume was fairly light. Here's what we saw in conclusion. The summer hours team concluded, and I agree, that the pilot program worked out well. Now, you may correct me in just a minute, but to the best of my knowledge, no complaints were reported by citizens or others seeking services during that time period that felt aggrieved or felt that there was a problem. I'm assuming some of those people who came to the door turned around and called us on Monday or checked on our website and got what they needed. No significant disruptions occurred to our services or internal processes during that time. Things went on as normal. Work got done by employees in the normal manner, and life went on, so to speak. And then I will say the staff definitely appreciated having these afternoons away from work. Since we have so few customers, it gave them a chance to get out there, enjoy an early start to their weekends during those 4 weeks. And as I've said before, when I presented this as a pilot program, there are a number of other communities who have started doing this for the very same reason. A, they're seeing very few customers on Friday afternoons because those folks are heading to the cabin, they're heading to the campground, they're doing their own recreational activities. And B, it's an opportunity at no added expense to the city or the village to provide something, a benefit to their employees as well, while still working a 40-hour week and getting in all the normal duties. So I'm not asking for anything tonight. It's just an informational item. If we want to look at something for 2022, I'll bring that back in another time. What I'm looking for tonight is any questions, concerns, observations, anything you've heard regarding the 4-week trial period.
Mrs. Spiros, you're first.
Okay, so a couple of things. I really didn't see any problem with those numbers. If you can flip back to that, the 30 that walked up to the door or anything like that. That was over a 4-week period, right? So really that's not that very significant to me. I didn't hear any personal complaints. I didn't, and I'm telling you, I have the district with the most calls, and I didn't get any about the hours. So that was a good sign. My question is this over now? Was this just a summer thing, or is this something that we're planning to continue? And if not, why wouldn't we continue it? Because here's my thing. Will we want to introduce this again next summer, and then you're starting back at point one? You know what I mean? You're reintroducing the program at the beginning of the summer. People then got to get used to it not being open on Friday afternoons. So I guess that's what I'm wondering, is why this was just a summer program, or is this something that you did consider going forward?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that you didn't get complaints. That's nice to hear, especially since it sounds like you maybe get quite a few in normal times. But beyond that, yeah, I mean, I didn't want to be presumptuous tonight in bringing a report to you. I pledged to bring a report back on September 14th of our experience and get your comments and concerns. From everything I've heard, from what the team reported, from my own observations, I definitely plan on presenting this as a summer of 22 thing as well, that we would do it for the full summer, do plenty of advertising in advance. But like I said, you were gracious enough to allow this, and I wanted to hear your feedback before I got down that road.
Go ahead.
So if I can follow up, again, I don't know what the plan is, going through the next few months. I personally wouldn't find a problem with this continuing, because we're in an era where we have to give some concession to employees because they're very hard to find. And I think our employees work hard, and I think a little bit extra, a few hours on their weekends, even though it's winter or, following, spring, whatever. I just don't have a big issue with that. I like consistency. And I think if the city got used to on Fridays, the place closes at this time, that's what they get used to. So I don't know if that's in your wheelhouse and you're considering that or not, but I certainly would not have an issue with it.
Mr. Butke.
I initially was against this, but seeing these numbers, talking to staff, I talked to staff and got some more information, how many people that they had coming in on Fridays before you got the data even. And I was wrong. Don't fall over, council, but I was wrong. I would also agree with Mrs. Spiros that I would look forward to having you bring that back and be consistent. So do it all the time. Now, I hope, and I'm sure you do, you have a recording on the phone that our Friday hours are such and such. If you got that, or, if you don't, we put it on there. I think it's all good. So I would support Mrs. Spiros, what she said as well.
Mr. Wagner, you're next.
Sure. I guess I'm going to put on my black hat and be the villain again. Actually, I did receive one phone call where the person was a little upset that the city employees were getting a benefit that a lot of other workers don't get. A lot of other business industries don't get. My take on it, I was opposed to it to start with. And that hasn't changed because, in case you were forgetting, we're in the customer service business. We're supposed to be here for the customers when and where they want us. If our income depended on the flow through the door, you bet we'd have it open all the time. But we're providing a service, and we're providing information. I thought it interesting that a lot of the calls went to development services. That's building permits and zoning questions. Sometimes that's the kind of thing that they get mostly. Believe me, I don't think they call up about the comprehensive plan a lot. But I could understand why it was going to development services and the clerk's office. The clerk's office is the big hub of activity for just about all city government. You have, she gets a lot of stuff through there. But the point is, I would like to see us return to a customer service ethic. I'd really like to see it. There was a mayor who was here that when he came into office, he made each one of the employees read a book on customer service. And he reminded them they were in the business. And I thought that was a great idea. But anyway, I'll vote against it again when it comes up. So I don't particularly care if it's 9-1. So thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Council President. I supported this during the pilot, and I will say this, I think I said this the last time. Just because we're not open on a Friday afternoon doesn't mean we're not providing customer service. I understand that we look at customer service from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5, but you can still provide excellent customer service and have your hours varied. And whether I like it or not, and I'm very intentional in saying, bringing me into this, whether I like it or not, the workforce is changing. And I feel like we have to adapt to the workforce. The generational work ethic of my grandparents and my parents is not the same work ethic that you're going to see. And whether that's good or bad, and we can argue whether that's good or bad, it has changed. The workforce has changed. People are sitting at home right now and choosing not to be employed for various reasons. I mean, I have looked at some articles, not of necessarily public, but even private companies that are choosing to get innovative in incentivizing their workforce with different benefits. Providing the benefit of being off on a Friday afternoon in the grand scheme of things is something I'm willing to adapt to very easily to try and engage our workforce and in a way that where they feel appreciated, and yet I still think we can still serve the public. Based on those numbers, I mean, that wasn't to me a huge amount of people. I did not receive one complaint either, and I would be willing to see this continue on year round. Thank you.
Mr. Fire.
I would support all the positive attitude about this issue. I think it's a great idea. Still working their 40 hours, you're getting the work out of your workforce. Most people have to realize that I know a lot of companies that go to 410s. A lot of them are going to stay on 410s. Some of them went. They would go try to work a half a Friday. They found out that the Friday that was being sloughed off in the morning, so they figured they might as well go to 410s and get the work done in 4 days, and they get the day off. It seems to work out. And there's a lot of people, even in this town, that don't come to a building to work. They work from home. So that's another thing. The work ethic has changed. You have to work with the people to get the job done. And I think there's not a problem with this.
I'll comment before I go to you, Mrs. Spiros. I think that we also need to look at not only the change in our employees, there's a change in the way business is conducted in America now. And I'm not as old as some of you, and I'm older than some of you, but I've had to make adjustments in the way I conduct business with various companies by contacting them over the phone or contacting them by email. I don't necessarily go to their place of business to do business with them anymore. So I think that I can agree with the changes in the hours. Now I'll go to you, Mrs.
Okay, just as a follow-up to the concerns Mr. Wagner had, if I may, since the calls came to Josh's office and Deb's office, can I ask, did you guys have any problem on Monday I'm assuming y'all returned people's calls if they left you a message. Was there anybody who really was very angry with y'all for not being available on Friday? And if so, what was the percentage of people that you saw?
Go ahead.
I can honestly say we did not receive any complaints in my office. And although it shows like we probably missed like 16 calls, probably I would say half of our calls are not even for us. It's for information. We get a lot of calls for the county, for the courts, just information in general that do not pertain to us. When I would come in on Monday, I had very few voice messages to call back. I did receive a few emails, but of course, with our emails, we did have a reply back that, we were closed and we would get back to them on Mondays.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't have any complaints with our department. I think Alderman Fisher was one of my calls that I missed. But otherwise, talking to our administrative associate, she said if there was a message, she returned it, and most people were very understanding. One of the people at the door, she said, actually was a customer trying to get a building permit, and she got back to them the following week and said, oh yeah, I forgot you guys were off, and that's why I stopped in. So I think everybody that we talked to from the public standpoint, were very understanding and didn't see an issue with it, and we didn't get any complaints directly at all.
Thank you, guys.
Mr. Butke.
Now, I'm joking here. Don't get, as long as our good firemen and fire people and our police people don't ask for Friday off.
Mr. Fisher.
So I'm going to do this just for the fun of it. I'm going to move that we make this a year-round schedule where Fridays are off after 12 o'clock.
You need that on the, Mr. Fire, you're seconding that motion?
Either way, I'm on the one.
Okay, Mr. Fisher, could you restate your motion?
I'm going to move to keep the schedule year-round for Friday afternoons off.
A second by Mr. Fire. And do we have any discussion on that motion? Mr. Witzel.
Thank you. Just to clarify what your motion is, you said to have Friday afternoons off. Do you mean to have City Hall closed with staff working if they need to?
Yes, I should have said that better.
So are we amending the motion?
If I may, could I just restate it?
Yes.
Or do I need to officially amend it? I will restate the motion to, I am moving to have City Hall closed on Friday afternoon, year-round.
Is that still your second, Mr. Fire? And Mr. Varsho, you have a comment.
Would this start next Friday? Being that you're already through the beginning of the work week this week?
No, the intent of this, well, I didn't make the motion, but the
I
intent.
understand that, so I'm asking Mr. Fisher. But it's
I'm
next
sorry.
Friday, being that they have to get their 40 hours in and it's already Tuesday?
I would assume that they would start at the next week, yeah.
Mr. Barr, you have.
Okay, I appreciate that. The intent of bringing this forward and even talking about it in the future was summer hours only. It's a Memorial Day to Labor Day kind of thing. That's when we see people, gone on Friday afternoons. The customers that we would normally see during the regular year on Friday afternoons are just not, they're not here. They're elsewhere enjoying summer as well. So my thought would be, if you wanted to extend it, and I really appreciate that, would be a Memorial Day to Labor Day kind of thing.
And are you saying that you feel that it'll cause problems for our customer base?
Can I comment on a couple more things? I just want to follow up on a couple of comments made if I can. I hate to jump in, but it looks like maybe the opportunity. A couple of things. First of all, when Jen came here a few years ago, one of the phrases that she coined was, we want to be an employer of choice. And there are times when our employees understand it's difficult for us to give them the wages and benefits that they'd like to see because we have some financial challenges. This was a great idea as a no-cost benefit to our staff during the summer. And to add to that, I think people here really appreciate it. I've heard some great feedback. They really appreciated you as a council 5 or 6 weeks ago saying you'd be willing to do that trial period. You can't imagine how that helped morale here, that you would go into those waters on their behalf to give them that break as long as they were meeting all the requirements, working the 40 hours and getting their work done. And the last thing I'd like to say actually is to you, Mr. Wagner. I'd be remiss if I walked away from this podium without challenging a little bit the customer service ethic. I don't think you meant it in the way that I took it when you first said it, but I think whatever hours we work here, I think there's a customer service ethic on our staff that works really hard to get the job done. They're personable, they're helpful. So whether we're done at noon on Friday or whether we work till 4:30 on Friday, I don't like the thought hanging out there for people watching us that we need to develop a customer service ethic. And like I said, maybe that's not the way you intended it, but I feel obligated to say that on behalf of our staff.
Mr. Witzel, your comment?
Thank you. I've sat pretty quiet here today, pretty unusual, but I just need to say a few things here. Customer service, I think, is vital. vitally important. I will be supporting this because I feel that customer service can be provided in a lot of ways. A year ago, we found out that we can provide customer service online and through remote needs when, or, remote means when necessary. Thankfully, that isn't a necessity all the time, but I think we've discovered that. My mind has changed on a lot of things in the last 18 months, including, potential remote attendance to a meeting. But the point is, I think we are dealing with a different generation who oftentimes don't even want to come to City Hall. They want to be able to call, they want to be able to go online, they want to be able to get what they want to get. They don't want to talk to anybody. I'm married to one who doesn't want to talk to anybody. So I think that as long as what's necessary to be available for people is available for people, I think that that's really what's important. I also really can appreciate what Mrs. Spiros said. Consistency is important. I don't want to have to think, okay, is this pre-Labor Day, post-Labor Day? Is this what? No, let's just say it's year-round. This is the way it is. I understand your comments, Mr. Barg, with it was meant as a summertime thing. We're also a hunting community. We're also a, holiday community. I mean, there's things that are coming up. People may want to travel to visit somebody on a weekend for the holidays coming up. There's a lot of reasons. And just because City Hall is not open from noon till whatever time we close now on a Friday, fine. If I'm working, I can close the door and know that for 4 hours, I'm not going to have somebody coming to the gate. So a nice way to wrap up the work week. There's a lot of things that I think that this can potentially provide. And if it gives a little bit of flexibility, and I really find it hard to believe that every single staff member, or even a majority of the staff member, are going to be working 4 9s and a 4 every single week. I think for the most part, it's going to be I'll work my 8-hour day. But when I have that flexibility to say, this week I want to take off a little early, I'm going to work a little harder earlier in the week, I think that that's a great thing to have. That's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. And Steve, I thought I defined it rather well. Is that we're here at the behest of, we want to put it that way, of our constituents. We are here to provide the service for them and have them done. And it's not the matter that I didn't say that your staff wasn't providing customer service when they're here. I'm saying that the customers need to have need to purchase or get the services of the city when they want to, not us. We're not the ones who determine when they have a need. They're the ones that determine when they have a need. And I just can't believe what I heard over here a little while ago, that, okay, this is the ethic of your grandfather. Give me a break. This is an ethic that should be instilled in everybody who decides that they're going to seek a living in public service, in city service, in county service. If you're going to do it, you're here for them. You're not here for yourself. So that's where I'm coming from. And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for it. And I'm not going to join in the chorus of the poor employees need another break. I appreciate what our employees do, but I do think that they've got to understand when they choose to go into this field, that's what they do. Thank you.
And just to clarify, I'm not asking you to apologize, and I already said that, maybe you didn't mean it the way I took it. I just didn't want the phrase hanging out there that we need to develop a customer service ethic. And like I said, maybe I took that in another direction. I just didn't want that hanging out there.
Steve, I have a question. Do you feel that this requires more time for you to look at the study to see if it's feasible for a working, to work on a full-time basis?
Yeah, I never thought about it that way until this very moment.
I realized that it was just sort of
I only thought about it as a summertime thing. I can certainly spend some time talking to our staff and seeing what other issues or concerns that might raise. The intent was really following along with what we've seen other communities do as a summertime thing during the vacation season, if you will, when customers are not as frequent. But I mean, there've been some good points made here tonight. I think, Adam, you made some good points, and Rebecca and others, about the way people get services now. It's not really the same way they always have. They're doing more online and some things of that nature. So I'd be willing to look at it. I wasn't asking for anything more. Well, actually, I wasn't asking even for summertime tonight. I was asking just to receive the report. But I'm glad to see the support. for summer hours during the summer. If you want me to look beyond that, I'll certainly talk with staff, have some conversations, and get back to you.
Mr. Hendler, your comment.
Thank you, Council President. Yeah, I'm going to join Mr. Wagner, only from a much different standpoint. I'm almost tempted to amend this particular motion to ask citizens to defer their taxes that they pay to this organization to an indefinite period of time at their choosing. Now, if that doesn't sound ridiculous, I think this whole conversation, well, that's enough, thank you.
I'm going to offer a motion to postpone this matter to our September 28th meeting prior to vote on it at that time. Mr. Wagner seconds that motion. I know, but you can, this is a motion to postpone. It's on this new rule. I'm utilizing this newfound information. Is there comment on postponing it?
Just,
Mr. Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could you please at least state why you think that's necessary?
I think it's necessary because Mr. Barg obviously hadn't planned to present that as an option today, and that it was sort of sprung on him. And I think that it just needs some more study to see if it's feasible. I'm not saying that I'm against it or for it at this point, but I could see merit in it. But I think that it just needs to be fleshed out a little bit more before we vote on it and make it a rule.
Yeah, there are obviously times like elections and tax times and stuff when we'd be obligated to do otherwise, but I hadn't really thought about it till tonight.
Mrs. Hall.
I was just going to add, Steve is correct. We do have some election deadlines, but it's no different than when we were closed. We're just open on those days and we keep them within the Common Council chambers for those exceptions.
Any other comments on this motion? Okay, so first we will vote on the motion to postpone. It's not a motion to amend, it's a motion to postpone voting on the other issue. So a yes vote is to vote to postpone it, a no vote is to vote on the first motion tonight. So please vote. One, two, three, four. That motion fails. Going back to our original motion, is there further comment on that? I see no further comments, so this will be the motion to approve the closing of City Hall on Friday afternoon.
During the summer? Oh, all year.
Permanently.
I'm sorry, I'm behind. I apologize.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
So please vote on that. And that motion carries.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll move on to item S, an update on the status of the 2022 city budget presented by Ron Allman, Finance Director, and Steve Barg, City Administrator.
Thank you. And in no way will this be an action item, I can tell you that for sure. As we get ready for the council meetings, as we get ready for next month's council meetings on the budget, we just want to give you an update. Sort of in carrying along with the football thing, we can talk about this as kind of like setting the field for you, setting the playing field, the goalposts, the yard lines. Where are we at? What are we facing? And maybe answering any questions you have about the basics of where we're headed for the 2022 budget year. So I'm going to start out a little bit. Ron's going to give most of the information, but you remember for the 2021 budget, we were able to fully fund our debt service. That was a huge step for us. And Dave Ferris from Ellers isn't here anymore, but that was a big step in terms of our financial progress. In conjunction with a slight reduction, as I said before, in general fund expenses. And I can't remember a city I've worked in as administrator in a quarter century where we've actually had the general fund expenses of 1 year be less numerically than the previous year. So that was good. A lot of work by the council, a lot of trimming of some budgets along the way. We're looking to restore our credit rating. We're still at A1 with a negative outlook. We're hoping to remove the negative outlook in the next year or two, and then ultimately get back to the AA3, which is where we were a few years ago. We want to continue to fully fund our debt. We're looking to reduce the general fund deficit for 2022 from roughly 700,000 to half that, around 350,000. That's our goal. We want to limit borrowing to the amount paid off. So with the approved CIP, including 17th Street East, of roughly 3.4 million, plus the 513,000 for the Daniel Street, we want to make sure that that amount of debt is paid off as part of our 2022 budget. And then we want to restore the general fund balance to the policy parameters. The TID advances have declined a little bit in recent years, so we're making progress, and projected for 2021 is 1.2 million. Those are some of the things that we're working on that are at a high level, but they're important. It shows progress from the meeting we had back here. If you remember the gut-wrenching meeting we had back here, I think it was January of 2019, if I'm right, where we realized we were dealing with a significant problem. And in the last 2.5 years, we made progress. We want to keep making progress as part of the 2022 budget. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ron for some more comments.
Sure. Thank you, Steve. So what I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit is just what goes into the first pass of the budget and what I hand to Steve. So this is, and I'll be very brief, kind of logistics. So at the very start of the budget, we really focus on the expenses, and our goal is that general fund expenses will increase by 2.5% or less. So what I do is the first pass of the budget, we either call the cost of living or the finance budget. So it's things that generally you've seen before or have approved already. So what goes into that first pass of the budget is all approved staff as of June 1st. So we've talked about various positions being rated by McGrath. They're not in there until you approve them. The wages are at the approved comp plan and union wage increases, approved CIP and borrowing. So the guts of the first pass of the budget, you've already kind of seen it, had a look at. We then fill it with actual benefit elections by employee, and then I do a broad assumption for all the other line items, utilities, health insurance, those kind of things. I do review it, so the reason I don't call it a strict cost of living budget, because that implies that I just take last year and add 3%. That's not the case. You know, we make judgment calls when we're reviewing for things that may have been over budgeted or under budgeted, and we make some adjustments as we go through. So that's the first pass of the budget, completely done by finance now. And we push it out to the departments, say, here's your cost of living budget. And what that does is it really allows the department heads to focus on changes and Steve to focus on changes instead of getting caught up in, you know, I got a little more office supplies, that doesn't matter. So really their time is spent on the big things. You know, for example, like with Justin's budget, he's not here now, you know, going from HEFCO to the aquatic center. So I pre-fill all the stuff, and the conversation with Justin and Steve is really, okay, what are we going to need for staffing for the aquatic center? What are we going to need for concessions and those kind of things? So finance is really just kind of an enabler there to get all the paperwork out of the way. So when I push it out to the departments, they review it and they can either sign off as is, you know, if not much has changed in your department, you don't need new staff, they can sign off, and a fair amount do. Other than that, they then put in a budget request for Steve. So Steve reviews the list of budget requests. That's really what he's focusing on. So like I said, build the base budget and push it forward. So like I always say, you know, the budget general fund reflects what you'd expect. You know, the main services, police, fire, streets are 2/3 of the budget. You add parks and library, that's about 82% of the general fund budget. So that's the focus now. Revenue, unfortunately, and all the big numbers, you know, are kind of outside the control of city staff and don't come along till later. What I call like the internal revenue, which is our fees, permits, those kind of things, that's 5% of our revenue. You know, so the big numbers are kind of dictated to us. Interest is an environmental factor, state aids, transportation aids, assessed value, the levy increase, those all come along later in the process. So really focus on making sure our expenses are in order. So for the first pass of the budget, I generally hold all those flat till we get better information. So as we start getting the transportation aids, we update the budgets and go from there. And I don't have a lot of comments about non-general funds, you know, I could talk all day about them if you'd like. I'm glad to answer questions, but I just wanted to point out two. One, always good to say our existing TIDs are doing very well. And as far as it relates to the ARPA money, so what have we done with that is we put it into Fund 416. What that is a miscellaneous capital outlay. So we put the money in there, so it's outside the general fund. And what I did for the budget is I budgeted as a block expense of the amount of that we're going to receive. We don't know what we'll spend it on. We have a group going. So hopefully in early to mid 2022, we'll present our recommendations. Council can vet it and we'll decide, but it's just put in there because we're likely to spend it in 2022. All right, so I shuffle all the paper, and I've kind of got the easy part, because when it comes to handing it off, and I've done my part, I hand it to Steve and say, all right, to stay under your 2.5% general fund, you've got $125,000. So out of the whole budget, once we fill it with the things that have been basically approved or from last year, Steve's got 50 general fund functions and 125,000 in staff requests. So I think the last comments are going to be about kind of the challenges that Steve has with there. But I'll stop there for any questions for me just on budget formulation, goals, any non-general fund.
Anyone have any questions?
Try to be quick.
Yeah. And when I walked away from the podium, I thought maybe, given how things went for Green Bay, Minnesota, and the entire NFC North, maybe the football analogy wasn't my best way to start. I'll keep the timing in mind for my next time at the podium. Yeah, Ron hit it on the head. I mean, it's been a good system. The software's helped. He does a great job. The department and division heads do a wonderful job. When it comes down to it, though, yeah, right now he's right. There's about $125,000 I have to work with to stay within the parameters and several $100,000 of requests. I think it's up around $600,000 or $700,000 at this point of requests to try and sort through and work through to boil down to what I can bring to you ultimately. So the fund, I mean, as much as the process has gotten better, the software has gotten better, the ultimate work is still a bit of a challenge at the finish line. But we have the uncertainty of the assessed value. We have the uncertainty of state and federal, state aids. Transportation aids are always hard to predict. They go up one year, they go down another year. We try and get a sense of where they're headed. Shared revenue, connecting highway aids, all these things we get from the state. It's a good portion of our revenue we get from Madison. 54% of the dollars we use in general fund are from property taxes, but I think roughly a third is from the state aids, and so we're never quite sure how that's going to turn out. So there's some unknowns that we have to play with right up until early October in terms of some of those revenues. But we work together. We have a terrific staff, a wonderful staff of people who can give and take. They can work as a team. And we just want you to know kind of where we're looking at as we're still 4 weeks out from the delivery of the budget, and then following that, the first public meeting. So like Ron said, we'd take any questions that you might have right now.
Mr. Wagner.
Yeah, help me understand this. When he says, okay, you've got $125,000 to stay within the 2.5% increase, you're still holding the mill rate flat, though. Is that correct? Or are you?
Well, right. And that's the revenue side.
Yeah, on the revenue side. So you could theoretically recommend a budget with a mill rate increase of something.
Yes.
And it would give you more than that $125,000 to work with.
But true, but we haven't talked at all about the revenue side, and there's a revenue side gap that needs to be addressed beyond that. So yeah, right now the revenue projections, if we talked about the gap between revenue and expenses, it's still fairly significant. It really is. But that's with no increase in levy, that's with no increase in state or aids or shared revenue or anything else. There's some other things we think might play in our favor in terms of the revenue side, but there's a gap. I'll be honest, there's a gap.
That's what I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, I don't blame you. We're going to work through as best we can for you.
Any other comments or questions at this time?
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to item T. Adjourn to closed session under Wisconsin statutes, chapter 19-85, paragraph 1, paragraph G, conferring with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation in which it is or is likely to become involved, specifically an update on litigation involving Marshfield Clinic's real estate tax claim. We have a motion from Mr. Wagner to go into closed session and a second from Mr. Rosendich. Please vote. Mr. Bucky and Mr. Hendler, can you vote?
Vote, you guys.
Vote. Yes, yes. Might be pushing the button for you. So the agency fairs, we'll send out an email.
Okay, we're in closed session.